Blood on her son's hands, a badge-turned weapon, a mother's scream swallowed by the night. This is the story of Celeste Morgan, a nurse who survived her shift only to be destroyed by the man sworn to protect her. But her husband wasn't just any man. He was a U.S. Marshal with the power to expose what America pretends not to see. Before we dive into this shocking true story, drop a comment below with your city. Let's see how far justice can reach. The night it happened, the sky over Northridge hung heavy and starless, the kind of darkness that swallows sound and memory alike. Route 47 stretched empty before Celeste Morgan's sedan, the yellow dashes of the center line flickering past like a heartbeat. She was tired, the kind of tired that settles into your bones after a 12-hour shift in the ER, where you hold strangers' hands through their worst moments and smile through your own exhaustion. In the rearview mirror, she could see Malik's small face pressed against the car seat. His mouth slightly open, lost in the innocent sleep only children know. 6 years old. He'd spent the evening with Miss Chen next door doing puzzles and eating chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. Now he was dreaming probably about the playground or the new superhero movie he kept begging to see. Celeste's hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, just like her father had taught her decades ago. Always be careful, he'd said. Always be respectful. Give them no reason. The unspoken "them" had hung in the air, even then understood without explanation. The headlights appeared suddenly in her rearview mirror, bright, blinding, too close. Her heart stuttered. She checked her speedometer 42 in a 45 zone. Her registration was current. Insurance card in the glove box. Inspection sticker fresh on the windshield. Just passing through, she told herself. Just another driver in a hurry. But the lights didn't pass. They stayed there, filling her mirror with white heat, and then, without warning, without siren, the patrol car swerved into the oncoming lane and cut her off. Celeste's foot slammed the brake. The seatbelt caught her chest. Behind her, Malik stirred, but didn't wake. What the? The words died in her throat as the patrol car angled across both lanes, boxing her in. She had nowhere to go except the narrow shoulder where gravel met grass. Her car rolled to a stop. The patrol car's lights erupted into red and blue chaos, painting the night in accusations she didn't understand. Celeste's hands stayed on the wheel. Her mind raced through every possible reason: broken taillight. Did she miss a stop sign? Had she drifted over the center line when she glanced at Malik? The officer's door opened. He stepped out slowly, deliberately, his silhouette backlit by the swirling lights. Tall, broad-shouldered, his hand rested on his belt as he approached, and even from inside the car, Celeste could feel the weight of his gaze. She pressed the button to lower her window halfway enough to speak, not enough to seem confrontational. Cold October air rushed in. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" The man bent down, his face coming into view under the brim of his hat. Garrett Cole, according to the nameplate on his chest. Mid-40s with a jaw that looked carved from granite and eyes that gave away nothing. "License and registration." His voice was flat absent of the courtesy her question had carried. "Of course. May I ask why you pulled me over?" "License. Registration. Now." Celeste's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "They're in the glove box. I'm going to reach for them now." "Do it slow." She moved with exaggerated care, pressing the button to open the glove compartment, extracting the papers with 2 fingers, as if handling explosives. Her license came from her wallet in the center console. Cole took them without a word and walked back to his car. Celeste watched him in the side mirror, watched him sit there under the dome light, radio in hand. Minutes stretched like hours. She could hear Malik's soft breathing in the back seat, that sweet sound of childhood innocence, oblivious to the tension crackling through the air. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Darius. Meetings ran late. Home by midnight. Love you both. She didn't pick it up, didn't want to give any excuse for escalation. Instead, she weighted her hands back at 10 and 2, her eyes forward. When Cole returned, he didn't hand back her documents. "Step out of the vehicle," Celeste's stomach dropped. "Officer, what is this about? I haven't—" "Out, now. My son is asleep in the back seat. I don't want to wake him." Cole's hand went to his belt, and Celeste's words caught in her throat. Her training as a nurse kicked in: assess the threat, de-escalate, protect the vulnerable. But all her training was for hospital rooms, not dark highways with flashing lights. "I said get out." She unbuckled, slowly opened the door, and stepped onto the gravel shoulder. The night air bit at her scrubs blue with little cartoon stethoscopes, the ones Malik loved because they made her look like a real superhero. Her legs felt unsteady. "Turn around. Hands on the vehicle." "Officer Cole, please. I'm a nurse at Mercy General. I've been on shift since 7 this morning. My son is 6 years old and he's sleeping." "I don't care if you're the governor. Hands on the car." Celeste complied, placing her palms flat on the cold metal of her sedan. She could feel the texture of the paint under her fingers, could hear the engine ticking as it cooled. Behind her, Cole moved closer, too close. She could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "You been drinking tonight?" "No, sir. I've been working." "Working where? Doing what?" "Mercy General Hospital, emergency room. I'm a registered nurse." "That right?" His tone suggested he didn't believe her or didn't care. "And you always drive around this late with a kid in the car?" The question was so absurd, it took her a moment to process. "I was at work. My son was with a babysitter. I'm taking him home so he can sleep in his own bed." "Uh-huh." Cole's flashlight clicked on the beam sweeping over the interior of her car. "You got anything illegal in there? Drugs, weapons?" "No, of course not." "Mind if I search it?" "I do mind, actually. I haven't done anything wrong. You haven't told me why you stopped me." That was the moment everything changed. Cole's hand locked around her wrist, yanking it behind her back with a force that sent a spike of pain up her shoulder. Celeste gasped, tried to turn, and his other hand caught her by the back of her neck. "Don't resist." "I'm not—" The world tilted. Her knees hit the gravel first, then her palms skinned tearing on the sharp stones. Cole's weight pressed down on her back, driving the air from her lungs. She tried to speak, tried to breathe, but her face was being pushed into the ground. "Mama!" The small voice cut through everything. Malik awake now, his face pressed against the car window. His eyes wide, terrified, not understanding. "Malik, close your eyes." Celeste managed to choke out, but he didn't. He couldn't. He watched as Cole forced her hands behind her back as metal cuffs bit into her wrists. "Please," Celeste begged, gravel grinding into her cheek. "Please, my son. Should have thought about your son before you decided to mouth off." "I didn't. I was just asking." Cole pulled her up by the cuffs, and pain exploded in her shoulders. Her knees barely worked. Blood trickled from her lip, where it had split against a stone. Malik was screaming now, his small fists pounding against the window. "Mama, Mama, stop! Let her go!" "Someone shut that kid up," Cole muttered into his radio. "I need backup. Uncooperative suspect." "Suspect?" Celeste's voice cracked. "Suspect of what? What did I do?" Cole didn't answer. He marched her toward his patrol car, and she twisted to look back at Malik, at her baby boy, whose hands were now pressed flat against the glass, tears streaming down his face. "It's okay, baby," she called out, though nothing was okay. "Mama's okay. Just stay in the car. Don't move." A second patrol car arrived within minutes, then a third. Officers emerged, their voices a cacophony of static and jargon. One of them, a younger man with nervous eyes, approached her car. "There's a kid in there." "I know there's a kid in there," Celeste shouted, her composure finally shattering. "That's my son. Please, he's 6 years old. He's scared." "Ma'am, you need to calm down." "How am I supposed to be calm? I haven't done anything wrong. I'm asking you. Please just let me explain to him." "Social services is on the way," the young officer said, not meeting her eyes. The words hit like a physical blow. No, no you can't. He doesn't need social services. I'm his mother. His father is... Ma'am, until we sort this out, the child needs to be placed in protective custody. Protective custody? From what? From me. Celeste's voice rose to something between a laugh and a sob. I'm protecting him. I've been protecting him. You're the ones terrorizing him. Cole's hand tightened on her arm. That's enough. They put her in the back of the patrol car, the cage separating her from the front seat, smelling of sweat and fear, and the ghosts of everyone who'd sat there before. Through the window she could still see Malik, still hear his screams as a woman in a pantsuit social services probably approached the car and opened the back door. No! Celeste threw herself against the cage, the cuffs cutting into her wrists. Don't touch him. Malik. Listen to me. Mama will be right back, okay? I promise I'll be right back. But Malik wasn't listening. He was reaching for her, his small hands grasping at nothing as the woman tried to unbuckle him. He kicked, he writhed, he screamed his mother's name until his voice went hoarse. And then they took him. Celeste watched through tears and safety glass as they carried her son, still reaching for her, still crying, to another car. She watched as his face disappeared behind tinted windows. She watched as they drove away, taking with them the only person in the world who needed her more than she needed her next breath. The patrol car's engine started. Cole's voice came through the speaker, mechanical and indifferent. Booking station's 20 minutes from here. You got anything you want to say? Celeste pressed her forehead against the cold window. Her shoulders shook. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You didn't even tell me why you stopped me. Silence answered her, and in that silence lived a truth she'd known her whole life, but had desperately hoped her son would never have to learn, that sometimes there is no reason. Sometimes the why doesn't matter. Sometimes you're just guilty of being alive in the wrong skin, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. At the Northridge police station, the fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects. Celeste was processed through a system designed to strip away dignity, emptied of her belongings, photographed, fingerprinted, told to stand here, sit there, wait. She waited in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and desperation. The bench was metal and cold. Her wrists still bore the red marks from the cuffs. Blood from her split lip had dried on her chin, and no one had offered her so much as a tissue. I need to call my husband, she said for the 5th time, when an officer finally appeared at the cell door. You'll get your call. When? When I say so. Another hour passed, then 2. The clock on the wall, industrial, white-faced, cruel in its precision, marked each minute with a tick that echoed in the silence. Celeste's mind raced through scenarios: Malik crying himself sick, Malik in some sterile office with strangers, Malik thinking she'd abandoned him. She pressed her palms to her eyes and tried to breathe through the rising panic. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like she taught her patients. But her patients had been in accidents, or had heart attacks or broken bones. Things that made sense. Things that could be explained and treated. This had no diagnosis code. When they finally let her make a call, her hands shook so badly she could barely dial. It went straight to voicemail. Darius was probably still in meetings, his phone on silent. Baby, it's me. Her voice cracked. Something happened. I need you to call me as soon as you get this. They took Malik. The police, they pulled me over and... The tears came, then unstoppable. I don't know where he is. Please. Please, I need you. The officer tapped his watch. Time's up. I need to call someone else. My neighbor or my mother. One call, that's the rule. But my son. Back to the cell. She spent the night on that metal bench, her mind conjuring every worst-case scenario. When exhaustion finally dragged her into something resembling sleep, she dreamed of Malik's hands against the glass, reaching, always reaching. Dawn came gray and cold. Celeste was released at 6:47 a.m. with a citation for failure to comply with lawful orders, and a court date 3 weeks away. No charges filed. No explanation given. just a manila envelope with her belongings and a desk sergeant who wouldn't meet her eyes. "Where's my son?" she asked. "Where did they take him?" "Child Protective Services. You'll need to contact them directly." "Contact them? He's my son. You can't just—" "Ma'am, I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing investigations." "What investigation?" "Investigation of what?" But she was talking to a closed door to a system that had already decided she wasn't worth listening to. Outside, the October morning bit at her bare arms. She'd left her jacket in the car that had been towed impounded another problem for another moment. Right now, all that mattered was Malik. Her phone was dead. She walked 6 blocks to a gas station, borrowed a charger from a sympathetic clerk, and waited while it powered on. 17 missed calls. 32 text messages, all from Darius. She called him, and he answered before the first ring finished. Celeste. Just her name, but it contained everything: relief, fear, rage, love. "I'm out," she said, and then the dam broke. "Darius, they took him. They took our baby, and I couldn't stop them. I know. I'm already working on it. I've been on the phone with social services since 4 a.m. They're saying he's in emergency foster placement, that there was concern about his safety. His safety from me. I know, baby. Listen to me. I'm at the DHS office now. They're stonewalling me, but I've got calls into the regional director and the state ombudsman. We're going to fix this." "Where is he? Is he okay? Is he crying? Does he have his blanket?" "He can't sleep without his—" "Celeste, breathe. I need you to breathe for me." She tried, failed, tried again. "Come to 1400 Market Street, Department of Human Services. I'll be waiting outside. We're going to get our son back." The Uber ride took 20 minutes. Celeste stared out the window at a world that looked exactly the same as it had yesterday before everything shattered. People walked dogs, opened shops, carried coffee. How could they? How could life just continue when hers had stopped? Darius was pacing outside the building, phone to his ear, his federal credentials clipped to his belt. When he saw her, he ended the call mid-sentence and pulled her into his arms. For a moment, she let herself break, let herself feel the safety of him solid and sure. But only a moment. "Tell me what's happening," she said, pulling back. His jaw was tight. "The police report says you were uncooperative and potentially impaired. Claims you posed a danger to the minor in your vehicle." "That's a lie. That's a complete Darius. I was stone sober. I'd just left work. I hadn't even had coffee." "I know." "Did they do a sobriety test?" "No." "A breathalyzer?" "No." "Then how can they—" She stopped, understanding dawning like nausea. "The dash cam. The patrol car would have recorded everything." Darius's expression told her everything she needed to know. "It malfunctioned," he said quietly. "According to the report, technical difficulties. No footage available." The world tilted. Celeste reached for the wall to steady herself. "That's convenient, isn't it?" They stood there on the steps of the Department of Human Services, 2 people who'd played by every rule, done everything right, and discovered that the game was rigged before they ever started playing. "What do we do?" Celeste asked. Darius's eyes, warm, brown eyes that had looked at her with love for 8 years, that had crinkled with joy when Malik was born, that had seen her through every hardship, hardened into something she'd never seen before. "Now," he said. "Now, we stop playing their game." He opened his jacket, revealing not just his badge, but an entire file folder tucked into the inner pocket. "I made some calls this morning, called in some favors, started pulling strings I didn't even know I could pull." He handed her the folder. "This is everything the Northridge PD has tried to bury in the last 5 years. Complaints, settled lawsuits, patterns." Celeste opened it, her nurse's eyes scanning the pages with clinical precision. Names, dates, accusations, and they're appearing again and again like a signature, Officer Garrett Cole. "He's done this before," she whispered. 17 times that I can prove. Probably more that never got reported. And they kept him on the force. They promoted him. The rage that filled her then was something clean and cold and absolute. Not the hot fury of the moment, but something deeper. Something that knew patience. Something that understood that justice wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon, and she'd just started running. "We're going to get Malik back," she said. "Yes. And then we're going to make sure this never happens to another mother, another child." Darius took her hand, squeezed it once. "Yes," he said again. "We are." Inside the building, a caseworker with tired eyes and too much paperwork finally agreed to let them see their son supervised 1 hour pending further review. They waited in a room painted the color of old teeth, sitting in plastic chairs designed for maximum discomfort. And then the door opened and Malik walked in. He looked so small, so much smaller than he had just 12 hours ago. His eyes were red and swollen. His favorite dinosaur shirt rumpled from sleeping in it. When he saw Celeste, he stopped. "Mama!" She dropped to her knees, arms open, and he ran to her. He crashed into her chest and wrapped his arms around her neck and held on like she might disappear again. "I'm here, baby. Mama's here. They said you were in trouble, that I had to go with them. I didn't want a mama. I wanted you." I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Darius joined them, forming a circle of 3, a family rebuilding itself, molecule by molecule. Malik pulled back his small hands on Celeste's cheeks. "Why did that man hurt you?" The question hung in the air, heavy with an innocence that would never fully return. Celeste looked into her son's eyes and knew that whatever answer she gave would shape how he saw the world for the rest of his life. She could lie, could soften it, could tell him it was a mistake, a misunderstanding that sometimes grown-ups get confused. Or she could tell him the truth. Because sometimes, she said slowly, carefully, people with power forget that power is supposed to protect, not hurt. Sometimes they make bad choices. But here's what I need you to know. Malik, what happened to me, what you saw, it wasn't okay. And Mama and Daddy, we're going to make sure people know it wasn't okay. How? Darius crouched down beside them. By not being quiet. By not letting them pretend it didn't happen. By making sure your mama's story gets heard. Malik nodded, serious beyond his years. Like superheroes. Celeste touched his cheek, felt the softness there, the baby fat that would eventually give way to the man he'd become. "Yeah," she whispered. "Like superheroes. The kind who don't need capes. Just courage." The caseworker cleared her throat. 5 minutes left. 5 minutes. 300 seconds to convince her son that the world hadn't ended. That love still existed. That morning would come again. Celeste used every single one. The supervised visit ended with Malik being led away again, his small fingers slipping from Celeste's grasp like water through a broken dam. She watched through the observation window as he turned back 3 times, each glance a question she couldn't answer. The caseworker's heels clicked down the hallway, a metronome of bureaucratic indifference, and then they were gone. Celeste stood there long after the hallway emptied, her palm pressed against the glass, still warm from where Malik's hand had been on the other side. "We need to go," Darius said softly, his hand on her shoulder. "I've got a meeting with our lawyer in an hour." She turned to face him. "I can't leave him here." "I know, but if we're going to get him back permanently, we need to do this right, legal, by the book. Their book hasn't exactly worked in our favor. Then we write a new one." The lawyer's office occupied the 3rd floor of a brick building that had seen better decades. Margaret Chen had been practicing family law for 30 years, and her face showed every case she'd fought and lost. She greeted them with a firm handshake and no false optimism. "I've reviewed the police report," she said, spreading papers across her desk like a surgeon preparing instruments. "It's thin, vague, deliberately so. "What does that mean for us?" Celeste asked. "It means they're protecting themselves. No specific allegations, no evidence of impairment, no documented reason for the escalation. Just enough language to justify the stop and make you look uncooperative." Darius leaned forward. "The dashcam footage conveniently malfunctioned. Yes, I saw that." Margaret removed her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. "In my 3 decades doing this, I've seen that particular technical difficulty arise in exactly the cases where the footage would exonerate the victim." "So what's our play?" Darius asked. "We request a full custody hearing. I'll petition the court for immediate return of your son based on lack of evidence of any danger. In the meantime, we document everything. Every interaction with social services, every visit, every delay. And we pray the judge assigned to your case has a conscience." Celeste's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. "How long?" "Could be 2 weeks. Could be 2 months." 2 months. The words came out strangled. "He's 6 years old. He doesn't understand why we're not coming to get him." Margaret's expression softened. "I know, and I'm going to fight like hell to get him home faster. But I won't lie to you, the system moves slowly, especially when it's protecting its own mistakes." They left the office with a folder full of forms and instructions, and the hollow feeling that comes from being told to wait while your child suffers. In the parking lot, Darius stood by their car. Celeste's had been released from impound that morning, scratches on the door from where Cole had pushed her against it and pulled out his phone. "I'm making a call," he said. "To who?" "Someone who owes me a favor." He dialed, waited, then spoke in the clipped professional tone Celeste had heard him use for work. "Jackson, it's Morgan. I need access to the NLET's database." "No, not officially. This is personal. I understand the protocol. I'm asking you to bend it. 20 minutes. I'll be there." He ended the call and looked at Celeste. "I'm going to the field office. There are some things I can access through federal channels that civilian attorneys can't." "What things?" "Personnel records, complaint histories, settlement agreements that get buried under NDAs. The Northridge PD is local, but any federal investigation that touched them, any civil rights complaint filed with the DOJ, those leave traces." Celeste studied her husband's face, seeing the Marshal she'd met 9 years ago emerge from behind the father and husband. This was Darius in his element hunting targets who thought they were untouchable. "Be careful," she said. "I'm always careful. That's why I'm good at what I do." She caught his wrist before he could turn away. "I mean it, Darius. These people already showed us what they're capable of. If they find out you're investigating them, then they'll learn that I'm not some nurse they can slam to the pavement." He softened, brought her hand to his lips. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. What I mean is they picked the wrong family. They hurt my wife. They traumatized my son. And they think they can hide behind a badge and a broken camera. I've taken down fugitives who disappeared for years. I've tracked money through 6 countries. These local cops with their small-time corruption baby. I eat people like this for breakfast." She wanted to smile at his confidence, but fear still coiled in her stomach. "Just promise me you'll come home." "Always." The U.S. Marshal Service field office sat in a nondescript federal building downtown, all concrete and security checkpoints, and the quiet efficiency of people who dealt in serious matters. Darius, badged through security, exchanged nods with colleagues who knew better than to ask questions and made his way to the computer lab on the 4th floor. Jackson was waiting, a systems analyst who'd worked with Darius on 3 major fugitive cases and owed him for the time Darius had covered for him when a search warrant got executed on the wrong date. "You've got 30 minutes before my supervisor notices the access log," Jackson said, pulling up a chair to the terminal. "What are we looking for?" "Northridge Police Department, specifically Officer Garrett Cole." Jackson's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Pulling civil rights complaints filed with DOJ. Okay, we've got 4 in the last 7 years mentioning Northridge PD. And look at that. 3 specifically name your Officer Cole." Darius leaned in reading. The first complaint was from 2018, a man named Marcus Webb, who alleged Cole had beaten him during a traffic stop. Case closed, insufficient evidence. The second, from 2019, a woman named Keisha Johnson, who said Cole had sexually harassed her during a DUI stop. Case dismissed after she failed to appear at a hearing. The third, from 2021, a teenager named Devin Price, who claimed Cole had planted drugs in his car. Case settled confidentially. What about local complaints, internal affairs? Jackson pulled up another database. This is technically outside my clearance, but okay, I'm piggybacking on an existing investigation into police misconduct in the region. He whistled low. Darius, your guy Cole has 17 internal affairs complaints. 17. What were they for? Excessive force 8 times. Racial profiling 4 times. Improper conduct 3 times. False arrest twice. And his employment status. Active duty. Currently assigned to night patrol on the Southern District routes. Darius felt rage building like pressure in his chest. 17 complaints and he's still on the street. According to this, he's been cleared in all but 2 cases. Those 2 resulted in written reprimands. No suspensions, no demotions, nothing. Who cleared him? Jackson clicked through screens. Internal affairs investigations conducted by, looks like the same sergeant each time. Sergeant Ronald Pierce. Pull up Pierce. The screen refreshed with a personnel file. Sergeant Ronald Pierce, 22 years on the Force Internal Affairs Division for the last 8. And there, buried in his background, a detail that made everything click into place. Pierce and Cole had attended the police academy together. They'd been roommates. They're protecting each other, Darius said quietly. Looks that way. And check this out. Pierce approved the equipment maintenance log for patrol vehicles, including dashcam systems. So when Cole's camera mysteriously malfunctions, Pierce is the one who signs off saying it's a technical issue, not tampering. Darius pulled out his phone and started photographing the screen. Jackson, I need you to download everything you can. Personnel files, complaints, internal correspondence, maintenance logs. Everything. Darius, I know what it is. I know what I'm asking. But my son is in foster care because these people think they're above the law. I need ammunition. Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his hands hovering over the keyboard. Then he reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a flash drive, and plugged it in. If anyone asks, you hacked my computer while I was in the bathroom. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just nail these bastards. 28 minutes after he'd entered the computer lab, Darius left with a flash drive containing enough evidence to end careers and potentially launch criminal investigations. But evidence meant nothing without a way to use it, and he was still just one federal marshal with no jurisdiction over local police matters. He needed leverage. He needed publicity. He needed someone who could take this information and turn it into something the department couldn't sweep under the rug. He made another call, this time to someone he'd arrested 3 years ago. Trevor Michaels. This is Deputy Director Darius Morgan. We met when I brought you in on that wire fraud case. A pause. I remember. You were decent about it. Didn't rough me up like the locals wanted to. I need a favor. From a convicted felon must be desperate. I need contact information for investigative journalists, real ones. The kind who don't care about pissing off police departments. What kind of story we talking about? The kind that ruins careers and starts federal investigations. Trevor laughed sharp and knowing. Now you're speaking my language. I know someone. Used to write for the Tribune before she got fired for being too aggressive. Now she runs an independent outlet online. If you've got a story with teeth, she'll bite. Send me her number. Consider it done. And Morgan, good luck. I hope you fuck them up. The journalist's name was Sarah Kemp, and she agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the university campus. She was younger than Darius expected, mid-30s, with intelligent eyes and the wary posture of someone who'd been threatened more than once. I Googled you, she said as he sat down. Deputy Director with the Marshal Service. Impressive credentials. So why are you calling in favors from convicted felons to reach a journalist? most editors consider unemployable. Because most editors answer to owners who answer to advertisers who don't want to piss off the police. Fair point. She pulled out a tablet. So what's the story? Darius told her. Everything. The traffic stop, the assault, the malfunctioning camera, the missing son. As he spoke, Sarah's expression shifted from skeptical to intent to quietly furious. You have evidence of the pattern, she asked. He slid the flash drive across the table. 17 internal complaints, 4 federal civil rights complaints. All cleared by the same sergeant who went to the academy with Cole. Plus, maintenance logs showing a suspicious number of camera malfunctions specifically on nights when Cole was working. Sarah picked up the drive like it was something sacred. This is explosive. But you know, once I publish this, the department will circle the wagons. They'll claim you're a disgruntled husband making up stories. They'll attack your credibility, your wife's credibility, everything. Let them try. My record speaks for itself, and I'm not the only victim here. Those 17 complaints. Those are 17 other people they tried to silence. If we can find even a few who are willing to talk. I'm already on it. Give me 48 hours. I'll need to verify everything, reach out to sources, build the story properly. But if what you're telling me checks out, this will be front page. Darius stood, offering his hand. One more thing. My wife and I are fighting to get our son back. This story hitting might complicate that custody case. Or it might be exactly what you need. Hard to claim she's a danger to her child when you can prove the cops who took him have a history of this exact behavior. That's what I'm counting on. At home that night, Celeste sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at the dinosaur placemat that still marked Malik's spot. Darius found her there when he came in, folder of evidence tucked under his arm. I made progress today, he said, sitting beside her. Real progress. She looked up, and he saw the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Tell me. He laid it out for her. The complaints, the pattern, the journalist, the plan. As he spoke, something shifted in her expression. The victim receded, and the fighter emerged. When will the story run? She asked. Day after tomorrow, if Sarah can verify everything. And then what? Then the court of public opinion gets involved. Then the department has to respond. Then we stop being easy to ignore. Celeste reached for the folder, opened it, and began reading. Her medical training made her a fast reader, able to parse dense documentation and extract the critical details. As she read, her jaw tightened. This woman, Keisha Johnson. She said Cole pulled her over and made her... Jesus, Darius. I know. And Marcus Webb. Cole broke his nose and 3 ribs for a broken taillight. I know. And Devin Price, he was 17. Just a kid, and they... Her voice broke. She closed the folder, pressed her palms to her eyes. How many people, Darius? How many people did they do this to? Too many. But we're going to make sure it stops. She looked at him, then really looked at him, seeing the determination that had made him rise through the ranks, that had made him the kind of Marshal fugitives feared. I want to help, she said. This isn't just your fight. You've been through enough. Don't. She cut him off, her voice steel. Don't protect me like I'm fragile. I'm angry, Darius. I'm so angry I can barely see straight. And that anger needs somewhere to go that isn't just sitting in this kitchen staring at our son's empty chair. He studied her face, seeing the truth of it. What do you want to do? I want to find the others. The people who filed complaints. I want to hear their stories. And I want them to know they're not alone anymore. It took them 3 days to locate Marcus Webb. He was living in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side, working night security at a warehouse. When he opened the door and saw Celeste and Darius standing there, his first instinct was to close it again. Mr. Webb, please, Celeste said quickly. We're not with the police. We're victims too. He paused, hand still on the door. Victims of what? Officer Garrett Cole. The name hit him like a physical thing. His grip on the door loosened, and something ancient and exhausted crossed his face. "Come in," he said quietly. His apartment was small but immaculate, the space of someone who'd learned to control his environment because so much else was beyond control. He gestured to a worn couch and took the armchair across from them. "How did you find me?" he asked. Darius explained carefully about the federal databases, the investigation, the journalist. Marcus listened without interrupting, his hands clasped between his knees. "What do you want from me?" he asked when Darius finished. "Your story," Celeste said. "Not for us, for the journalist who's going to expose what Cole and the department have been doing, but only if you're willing, only if you're ready to speak." Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then he began to talk. "It was March 2018. I was coming home from my shift at the hospital. I'm a respiratory therapist. I'd just bought a new car, nothing fancy, but it was mine. First new car I'd ever owned. Cole pulled me over, said my tint was too dark. I showed him the inspection certificate, showed him the tint was legal. He didn't care, told me to get out. When I asked why, he grabbed me through the window and dragged me out. Broke my nose on the hood of my own car. Broke 3 ribs. Told me if I filed a complaint, he'd make sure I never worked in healthcare again." "Did you file anyway?" Celeste asked. "I did. Went straight to internal affairs. Gave a statement, showed them my medical records, showed them the damage to my car. You know what they told me? Insufficient evidence. Said I must have provoked him somehow. Case closed." He looked at them, his eyes haunted. "I had to sell that car. Couldn't drive it anymore without remembering his hands on my throat." Celeste reached across the space between them and took his hand. "I'm so sorry." "You said you're victims too. What happened?" She told him. All of it. The traffic stop. Malik's screams, the blood, the foster care. As she spoke, tears tracked down Marcus's face. "Your son," he whispered. "They took your son." "We're getting him back," Darius said firmly. "And we're making sure Cole never does this to another family." Marcus wiped his eyes, straightened his shoulders. "What do you need from me? Will you talk to the journalist? Will you let her tell your story? If it helps stop him, I'll shout it from the rooftops." They found Keisha Johnson 3 days later working as a paralegal at a small law firm. She was hesitant at first, afraid of retaliation, afraid of dredging up memories she'd spent 3 years trying to bury. But when Celeste told her about Malik, about watching her child be taken, Keisha's resistance crumbled. "I was afraid to go to that hearing," she admitted, sitting in her office after hours. "Cole called me the night before. Said if I testified, he'd make sure everyone knew what kind of woman I was. Said he'd tell my employer I was unstable, that I'd made advances on him. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college, terrified, so I didn't show up. Let the case get dismissed." "He can't do that to you anymore," Darius said. "Not with the evidence we have, not with the pattern documented." "You promise?" "I promise. And when this story breaks, there are going to be a lot of people watching, a lot of witnesses. He can't silence all of us." Keisha nodded slowly, then squared her shoulders. "Okay, I'll do it. Tell your journalist to call me." By the time Sarah Kemp's story was ready to publish, they'd found 6 more victims willing to go on record. 6 stories of stops that turned violent, of complaints that vanished, of a system that valued protecting its own over protecting the public it served. Sarah called Darius the morning the story went live. "It's up. Check the website." The headline filled his screen in bold black text. "Badge of Shame, Northridge Officer's Decade of Abuse Exposed." Below it, a subheading, "Federal Marshal Uncovers Pattern of Violence, Racism, and Systemic Cover-Up." The article was devastating. Sarah had woven together all 7 victim statements, documented every complaint traced, every investigation that went nowhere. She'd included scanned copies of the maintenance logs showing the pattern of camera malfunctions. She'd interviewed police accountability experts who confirmed that Pierce's role in clearing every single complaint was statistically impossible without corruption. And she'd ended with Celeste's story, with Malik's screams, with the image of a 6-year-old boy torn from his mother's arms for no reason other than a cop's unchecked power. Within 2 hours, the story had been shared 10,000 times. Within 4 hours, it was trending on social media under the hashtag #Northridge Files. Within 6 hours, national news outlets were picking it up. By sunset, cameras were parked outside the Northridge Police Department headquarters, and reporters were shouting questions at every officer who tried to leave. Celeste and Darius watched it unfold from their living room, the television showing Chief Henderson holding an impromptu press conference, his face red and furious. "These allegations are completely unfounded," he blustered. "Officer Cole has been a dedicated member of this department for 12 years. This is clearly a case of a disgruntled individual using his federal position to harass local law enforcement." "What about the 17 internal complaints?" a reporter shouted. "All thoroughly investigated and resolved. By the same sergeant who went to the academy with Cole." Henderson's jaw tightened. "I'm not going to discuss internal procedures with the media." "What about Celeste Morgan's son? Why is a 6-year-old in foster care?" "That matter is under review by Child Protective Services, and I'm not at liberty to discuss it." "Is it true Officer Cole's dashcam has malfunctioned 17 times?" "Technical difficulties happen. We're upgrading our equipment." Funny how those difficulties only seem to happen when Cole is accused of abuse. Henderson ended the press conference abruptly, pushing through the crowd of reporters to reach his car. As he drove away, Celeste saw it in his eyes through the television screen: fear. "He knows," she said quietly. "He knows they can't bury this anymore." Darius's phone rang. Margaret Chen, their attorney. "Turn on Channel 7, she said without preamble. They switched channels. A different press conference, this one held by the mayor of Northridge, a woman named Patricia Larson, who'd built her career on being tough on crime. "I want to be clear," Larson was saying, her voice measured and careful. "The allegations raised in today's article are extremely concerning. I've asked the Department of Justice to launch an independent investigation into the Northridge Police Department's internal affairs procedures. Additionally, effective immediately, Officer Garrett Cole has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of these investigations." The reporters erupted with questions, but Larson held up a hand. "I also want to address the situation involving Celeste and Darius Morgan. I've spoken with the Director of Child Protective Services, and we are expediting a review of their case. No child should be separated from loving parents due to unsubstantiated allegations. We will correct any mistakes that were made." Celeste's hand flew to her mouth. Darius pulled her close, his own eyes wet. "Did she just—" Celeste couldn't finish the sentence. "She's covering her ass," Margaret said through the phone. "But yes, she essentially just admitted the department screwed up. This is good, Celeste. This is very good. I'll file an emergency motion tomorrow morning. With the mayor's statement on record, we should have Malik home within 72 hours. When Celeste hung up, she turned to Darius and finally let herself believe it. "We're getting him back." "We're getting him back," he confirmed. But even as relief flooded through her, she knew this was only the beginning. Cole was on leave, but not fired. The department was being investigated, but investigations could be controlled, manipulated, slow-walked into irrelevance. The real fight was just starting. That night, unable to sleep, Celeste opened her laptop and began to type. She wrote down everything she remembered from that night. Every word Cole had said. Every moment of pain and fear. Every second of watching her son be taken. When she finished, she posted it to social media with a simple introduction. "This is what happened to me. This is why I won't be silent. This is why we all need to speak up." By morning, her post had been shared 50,000 times, and her inbox was flooded with messages. Messages from other mothers, other fathers, other victims who'd thought they were alone. Celeste read them all. Every single one, and she answered every one she could. The silence was breaking. The system was being forced to see itself, and Garrett Cole, for the first time in his career, understood what it meant to be afraid. The Department of Justice arrived in North Ridge on a Tuesday morning, 3 black SUVs rolling through town like storm clouds. Federal investigators carried boxes into a temporary field office set up in the old courthouse annex, and the North Ridge Police Department suddenly became very cooperative, very quiet, and very careful about what they said on record. Celeste watched it unfold from her living room where she'd been camped for the past week, coordinating with victims, answering reporters' calls, and counting down the hours until Margaret Chen's emergency custody hearing. 72 hours, the mayor had said. It had been 68, and every minute felt like holding her breath underwater. Darius was at the field office, now meeting with the lead DOJ investigator, a woman named Special Agent Linda Vasquez, who had a reputation for not giving a damn whose career she ended if the evidence warranted it. He'd left that morning with the flash drive and 3 folders of documentation, kissing Celeste's forehead and promising to call as soon as he knew anything. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb. "Just gave my statement to the feds. They're taking this seriously. Really seriously." Then one from Keisha Johnson. "Agent asked me if I felt safe coming forward. When I said yes because of you and Darius, she smiled. First time I've seen a cop smile at me in 3 years." Celeste's chest loosened slightly. It was happening. The machine that had tried to crush them was being dismantled gear by gear. Her laptop pinged with another wave of messages. She'd been expecting them, people sharing their own stories, asking for advice, thanking her for being brave. But this one was different. "Ms. Morgan, my name is David Chen. I'm a patrol officer with the North Ridge PD. I need to talk to you about Garrett Cole. I have something you need to hear." Celeste stared at the message, her finger hovering over the delete button. It could be a trap. Could be the department trying to find out what she knew, who she was talking to, how to shut this down from the inside. But something about the message felt different. Felt desperate in a way that reminded her of her own desperation a week ago. She typed back, "How do I know you're legitimate?" The response came fast. "You don't. But I've been on the force for 8 years, and I've watched Cole operate for all of them. I've stayed quiet because I have a family to feed and a mortgage to pay. But after reading what he did to you and your son, I can't sleep anymore. I have a recording. From his patrol car. From that night." Celeste's heart stopped, then started again too fast. The dash cam malfunctioned. The official dash cam did. But Cole doesn't know that some of us installed our own backup cameras after the department's equipment kept failing at convenient times. I pulled the footage before it could be erased. I've been sitting on it for a week trying to figure out what to do. Then I read your post. Where are you? Coffee shop on Maple Street. The one with the blue awning. I'm in uniform. If you don't feel safe meeting alone, bring someone. Celeste called Darius immediately. He answered on the first ring. I'm still in the meeting, what's... An officer from North Ridge says he has footage from that night. Real footage. He wants to meet. Silence on the other end, heavy with calculation. Where? Maple Street coffee shop. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't go in without me. I won't. And Celeste, if this is real, if he really has that footage, everything changes. She knew. God, she knew. Because footage meant evidence. Evidence meant no more, he said, she said. Evidence meant the truth, undeniable and permanent. The coffee shop was half empty when they arrived, the midday lull, when only freelancers and retirees occupied the tables. Officer David Chen sat in the back corner, his uniform crisp, but his face haggard. He was younger than Celeste expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much too soon. He stood when they approached, offered his hand. Thank you for coming. I know this is probably terrifying. Why are you doing this? Darius asked, not sitting yet. His Marshal's instincts were in full effect, assessing threat, calculating angles. Because I became a cop to help people, Chen said simply. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was part of a system that does the opposite. Cole isn't an aberration. He's what happens when good people stay quiet for too long. He gestured to the table. Please, sit. They did, though Celeste noticed Darius positioned himself where he could watch the door. Chen pulled out a tablet, his hands shaking slightly. Before I show you this, you need to understand something. Once this goes public, my career is over. The Brotherhood doesn't forgive whistleblowers. I'll never work in law enforcement again. Then why? Celeste asked. He looked at her directly. Because you wrote in your post that your son asked why the bad man hurt his mama. And you didn't have a good answer. I have a daughter who's 5. If someone did to my wife what Cole did to you, I'd want someone to speak up. So that's what I'm doing. He turned the tablet toward them and pressed play. The footage was grainy shot from Chen's patrol car, which had been parked 100 yards down the road, but it captured everything. The audio was what mattered most. They watched Celeste's car roll to a stop, watched Cole approach, and then they heard it. Good evening, officer. Is there a problem? License and registration. May I ask why you pulled me over? License, registration, now. The conversation played out exactly as Celeste remembered, her voice polite, his voice aggressive. When she mentioned her son sleeping in the back, Cole's response made Celeste's blood run cold, even though she'd lived it. I don't care if you're the governor. Hands on the car. Then came the moment that would change everything. Celeste on the recording, voice shaking, but controlled. I do mind, actually. I haven't done anything wrong. You haven't told me why you stopped me. And Cole's response caught crystal clear. These people always think they're above the law. Time to teach this one some respect. These people. The words hung in the coffee shop air like poison. The footage continued. The violence, the screaming. Malik's small voice crying for his mama. All of it captured, all of it undeniable. When it ended, Celeste realized she was crying. Darius's hand was on her shoulder. His jaw set so tight she could see the muscle jumping. That's a direct admission of racial motivation. Darius said, his voice deadly calm. That's not just assault. That's a civil rights violation, federal crime. Chen nodded. I know. That's why I had to bring it to you first before the department could bury it. Does anyone else know you have this? Darius asked. No, I copied it to a personal drive and deleted it from the system. As far as the department knows, this footage doesn't exist. We need to get this to the DOJ investigator immediately, Celeste said. And to Sarah Kemp, Darius added. The journalist. If we give it to the government alone, there's still a chance it disappears into some evidence locker while lawyers negotiate. Chen pushed the tablet across the table. It's yours. All of it. The original file is on there unedited, with metadata showing the date and timestamp. Do what you need to do. Officer Chen, Celeste said, her voice thick with emotion. You're saving my son's life. You know that, right? With this footage, there's no way they can justify keeping him from me. Then it's worth it, he said. All of it. They left the coffee shop and drove straight to the federal building. Agent Vasquez was still in her meeting with Darius's colleagues when they arrived, but when her assistant saw Darius's face, she interrupted. Vasquez emerged from the conference room, all business. Deputy Director Morgan, we're in the middle of... You need to see this, Darius said, holding up the tablet. Now. They reconvened in a secure viewing room. Vasquez watched the footage, once her expression neutral. Then she watched it again, taking notes. The third time she paused at the moment Cole said, "These people," and sat back in her chair. Mother of God, she said quietly. How did you obtain this? A confidential source within the Northridge PD, Darius said. An officer with a conscience. This source willing to testify. If guaranteed protection from retaliation, yes. Vasquez stood, began pacing. This changes everything. With this recording, we're not looking at just internal corruption or excessive force. This is explicit racial bias resulting in unlawful arrest and separation of a minor from their parent. The U.S. attorney is going to want to move on this immediately. How fast? Celeste asked. Federal charges could be filed within a week. And as for your son... Vasquez looked at her with something that might have been compassion. Show this to your family court judge tomorrow. I guarantee you'll have your child back by the end of the day. That night, Celeste couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Darius, staring at the ceiling, replaying Chen's footage in her mind. Tomorrow was the custody hearing. Tomorrow, she might finally hold Malik again, might finally bring him home where he belonged. But she also knew what releasing that footage publicly would mean. The firestorm was already intense. This would make it nuclear. Are you ready for what comes next? Darius asked in the darkness. No, she admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. He found her hand, squeezed it. The department is going to offer us money. A lot of it. They'll want us to sign an NDA, take a settlement, disappear quietly. We're not taking it. I know, but I needed to hear you say it. She rolled to face him. If we take their money and stay quiet, nothing changes. Cole gets fired maybe, but Pierce stays. The next officer with a God complex and a badge stays. The system that protected them stays. And Malik grows up knowing his parents had a chance to make things better and chose money instead. The system's going to fight back, Darius warned. They're going to dig into our lives, look for anything they can use against us. They're going to make this ugly. Let them try. I survived Cole slamming my face into gravel. I survived watching my son being taken. I can survive whatever they throw at me now. The custody hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in family court. Margaret Chen arrived early, her briefcase heavy with documentation and the tablet containing Chen's footage cued to the relevant moment. The judge is Patricia Morse, Margaret said as they walked up the courthouse steps. She's fair, but she's also cautious. She doesn't like being made to look bad, so if she thinks the initial removal was justified, she'll defend it. We have video evidence proving it wasn't, Celeste said. We do, but be prepared for the department to argue the footage doesn't tell the whole story. They weren't wrong. The county attorney representing Child Protective Services came loaded with counter-arguments. Celeste had a history of working long shifts that could indicate fatigue and impaired judgment. Darius's federal position meant irregular hours and high stress. The report from the foster care supervisor indicated Malik had adjusted well to his temporary placement, suggesting instability in the home environment. Celeste listened to them paint her life as somehow dangerous to her own son, and felt rage building like pressure in a boiler. But Margaret had coached her. Stay calm. Let the evidence speak. When it was their turn, Margaret stood and addressed the court with the calm authority of someone who'd fought this battle 100 times. Your Honor, the county's argument rests entirely on Officer Cole's report from the night in question. A report that claims Mrs. Morgan was uncooperative, potentially impaired, and posed a danger to the minor in her vehicle. However, we have video evidence that tells a very different story. She played Chen's footage. The courtroom went silent, except for the audio of that night. When Cole's words, "These people always think they're above the law," echoed through the speakers, Celeste saw Judge Morse's expression shift from neutral to horrified. The video played to its conclusion. Malik's screams, Celeste's pleas, the violence that had started this nightmare. Your Honor, Margaret continued, Mrs. Morgan is a registered nurse with an exemplary employment record. She had just completed a 12-hour shift saving lives. She was stone sober driving, safely taking her son home. The only danger to that child came from the officer who attacked his mother without cause. The county attorney stood scrambling. Your Honor, this footage raises serious questions about Officer Cole's conduct, but that doesn't automatically mean... Sit down, Judge Morse said, her voice sharp. She turned to Celeste. Mrs. Morgan, please approach the bench. Celeste stood on shaking legs and walked forward. Up close, she could see that Judge Morse was older than she'd appeared from the gallery, with gray streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of long years wrestling with impossible decisions. "Mrs. Morgan, I need to ask you directly. Do you love your son?" "More than my own life," Celeste said without hesitation. "And if he were returned to your custody today right now, what would you do?" "I'd take him home. I'd hold him while he cries. I'd let him sleep in our bed until he feels safe again. I'd do whatever it takes to help him heal from what that officer did to both of us." Judge Morse nodded slowly. "I've been a family court judge for 18 years. I've seen real abuse, real danger. I've removed children from homes where they were being hurt, and I've lost sleep over every single decision. What I'm seeing here isn't a mother who endangered her child. It's a mother who was brutalized by someone sworn to protect, and a system that compounded that trauma by taking her child as punishment." She turned to the county attorney. "The removal is overturned, effective immediately. Malik Morgan is to be returned to his parents today. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into why this case was pursued in the first place. Someone in your office saw that police report and decided it justified separating a child from his mother. I want to know who, and I want to know why." The gavel came down like thunder. "We're adjourned." Celeste's knees gave out. Margaret caught her, and Darius was there a second later, his arms around both of them. "You did it," Margaret said, smiling. "You got your son back." The foster placement office was a squat brick building that looked like every government facility ever built, designed for function rather than comfort. Celeste and Darius were led to a waiting room painted in aggressively neutral beige with plastic chairs and outdated magazines. They waited 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Then the door opened and a caseworker led Malik in. He looked different, older somehow in just the week he'd been gone. His eyes scanned the room warily, landing on Celeste with an expression that broke her heart. It was hope mixed with fear, the look of a child who'd learned that the adults he trusted could disappear. "Malik," Celeste said, her voice cracking. He didn't run to her this time. He walked slowly, carefully, like approaching something that might vanish if he moved too fast. "Are you really taking me home?" he asked. "Or is this another visit?" Celeste dropped to her knees so they were eye level. "Baby, I'm taking you home, for real, for good. You're never spending another night away from us. Promise. I promise. On everything I am, I promise." Then he broke. The careful facade crumbled, and he crashed into her arms, his small body shaking with sobs that seemed too big for someone so small. Celeste held him rocking, whispering the things mothers have whispered to frightened children since the beginning of time. "You're safe. I've got you. Nothing's going to hurt you again." Darius wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stayed like that until Malik's crying subsided into hiccups. "Can we go home now?" Malik asked, his face pressed against Celeste's shoulder. "Right now, baby. Right this second." They walked out of that building as a family. Malik holding both their hands, and Celeste felt something settle in her chest that had been displaced since that night on Route 47. Her son was home. The first battle was won. But as they drove through North Ridge, she saw the news vans camped outside the police station, saw the protesters with signs reading, "Justice for Celeste," and "Fire coal now," and she knew the war was far from over. That evening, Sarah Kemp called. "I've seen the footage Officer Chen provided. I'm running a follow-up story tomorrow morning, but I wanted to ask you something first." "What?" "The department is going to offer you a settlement. Probably a big one. Are you going to take it?" Celeste looked at Malik, who was building a tower with his blocks on the living room floor, humming to himself, starting to be a child again. She thought about all the other mothers who didn't have a federal marshal for a husband. All the other children who'd watched their parents be brutalized with no recourse. "No," she said. "We're not taking their money." "Why not? You could set your son up for life. College fund, therapy, security." "Because if I take their money and disappear, they win. They get to say, "See, it wasn't that bad, she took the check and went away." And the next time Cole or someone like him decides to use a traffic stop as an excuse to hurt someone, there won't be anyone to stop them. Sarah was quiet for a moment. That's going to be the headline. Mother refuses settlement, demands accountability. This makes you a symbol, Celeste. You understand that you're going to become the face of this fight. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just want my son to grow up in a world where he doesn't have to be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect him. Fair enough. I'll run the story tomorrow. And Celeste, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. The settlement offer came 2 days later, delivered by a lawyer in an expensive suit who sat in their living room and tried to look sympathetic. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, the city wants to resolve this matter amicably. We're prepared to offer you $75,000 in exchange for a full release of all claims and an agreement not to discuss the incident publicly. We're not interested, Darius said immediately. I understand emotions are running high, but think practically. This money could help your son. Our son needs justice, Celeste interrupted, not a payoff. Mrs. Morgan, I recognize you've been through a traumatic experience, but continuing down this path means years of litigation, media scrutiny, your family life exposed. Is that really what you want for your child? Celeste leaned forward, her voice steady. What I want for my child is to grow up knowing his mother didn't back down, that when faced with the choice between comfort and doing what's right, she chose right. You can take your $75,000 and shove it straight up the city attorney's ass. The lawyer blinked, recovered, tried a different tack. The federal investigation is going to proceed regardless. Officer Cole will face consequences. What more do you want? I want him in court, Celeste said. I want to face him on record in front of a judge and jury. I want every detail of what he did exposed. I want the system that protected him for 12 years to answer for why they looked the other way. And I want every other victim he brutalized to see that justice is possible. The city is prepared to go to 100,000. Not interested. 150. You're not hearing me. This isn't about money. It never was. The lawyer closed his briefcase, stood. You're making a mistake. When this goes to trial, everything about your life will be examined. Every choice you've ever made, every mistake, every moment you're not proud of. They will tear you apart on that stand. Let them try, Celeste said. I've got nothing to hide and everything to fight for. When he left, Darius turned to her. You know he's right about one thing. A trial is going to be brutal. I know. But we're not doing this the easy way. We're doing it the right way. The federal indictment came down a week later. United States of America vs. Garrett Cole. 3 counts. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Excessive force and violating the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable search and seizure. Each count carried up to 10 years in prison. The news exploded. Northridge Files was trending again, but this time with a new hashtag, Justice for Celeste. The story had captured something in the national consciousness, tapping into a deep well of anger and frustration with police brutality, systemic racism, and the protection of bad cops. Support came from unexpected places. A legal defense fund set up by Marcus Webb and Keisha Johnson raised $50,000 in 48 hours. Civil rights organizations offered their attorneys. Celebrities shared Celeste's original post. A group of mothers in Minneapolis held a solidarity rally carrying signs with Malik's face and the words, "Never again." But the backlash came too. Police unions condemned the prosecution as an attack on law enforcement. Conservative pundits claimed Celeste was exaggerating, that she must have done something to provoke Cole. Online trolls sent death threats and vile messages. Celeste learned to stop reading the comments. She focused instead on the messages that mattered, the ones from other victims who said, "Thank you for being brave enough to speak." Those messages sustained her through the dark moments when doubt crept in. The federal hearing was set for early November, just weeks away. Agent Vasquez would present her evidence to a judge who would determine if there was enough to proceed to trial. It was a formality, Margaret assured them. With Chen's video, Cole's history, and the documented pattern of cover-ups, there was no question the case would move forward. The night before the hearing, Celeste sat with Malik as he got ready for bed. He'd been quieter lately, quicker to startle, prone to nightmares where he screamed for her and couldn't find her. Therapy was helping, but the trauma had marked him in ways that might never fully heal. "Mama," he said as she tucked him in. "Tomorrow's the big day, right, when you tell the judge what happened?" "That's right, baby." "Will the bad policeman be there?" "He will, but he can't hurt us anymore. There will be lots of people there to make sure everyone is safe." Malik was quiet for a moment, his small hand holding his worn, stuffed dinosaur. "When you tell the story, tell them I was scared. Tell them I tried to be brave, but I couldn't stop crying." Celeste's throat tightened. "Why do you want me to tell them that?" "Because maybe if they know kids get scared, they'll be more careful next time. So no other kids have to cry like I did." She kissed his forehead, this impossibly wise 6-year-old who'd been forced to understand injustice before he'd learned to tie his shoes. "I'll tell them everything, baby. I promise." The next morning, they drove to the federal courthouse in the city, 40 minutes from Northridge. The building was imposing, all marble and columns, and the weight of justice carved into stone. News cameras lined the steps. Protesters gathered on both sides, some supporting Celeste, others supporting Cole. Inside the hearing room was packed. Celeste saw Marcus Webb sitting in the gallery, giving her a nod of solidarity. Keisha Johnson was there too, along with the other victims who'd come forward. Officer Chen sat in the back in civilian clothes, looking both terrified and resolved. And there at the defense table sat Garrett Cole. He looked different in his suit, smaller somehow, without the uniform and badge. But when his eyes met Celeste's across the room, she saw no remorse, no shame, just resentment and rage that she'd dared to challenge him. Celeste held his gaze and didn't look away. She'd spent too many years looking away from uncomfortable truths. Not anymore. Agent Vasquez took the stand, first methodically laying out the evidence. The 17 complaints. The pattern of camera malfunctions. Pierce's role in clearing Cole every single time. The testimony of 7 victims spanning a decade. Then came the video. Chen's footage played on large screens, and the courtroom went silent. When Cole's words, "These people always think they're above the law," filled the room. She saw several members of the gallery shake their heads in disgust. Cole's attorney tried to argue context, tried to suggest the footage had been edited or that Cole's words had been misconstrued. But the judge, an older black woman named Honorable Denise Washington, cut him off. "Counselor, I've watched this footage 3 times now. There's no context in which those words aren't what they clearly are. An admission of racial bias. Move on." The defense crumbled from there. Without the protection of "he said, she said," without the ability to discredit Celeste's testimony, Cole's actions spoke for themselves. At the end of the hearing, Judge Washington delivered her ruling. "Having reviewed the evidence presented, I find that probable cause exists for all charges against Officer Garrett Cole. This case will proceed to trial. Additionally, I'm recommending the Department of Justice expand its investigation to include Sergeant Ronald Pierce and any other members of the Northridge Police Department who may have knowingly participated in obstruction of justice." She looked directly at Cole then. "Mr. Cole, you wore a badge that represents the trust between law enforcement and the community. You violated that trust in the most fundamental way. Whatever happens at trial, know that your actions have damaged not just the individuals you targeted, but every good officer who has to work twice as hard now to rebuild what you destroyed." The gavel came down. Cole was remanded to federal custody pending trial. As they led him away in handcuffs, Celeste felt Darius take her hand. They walked out of that courthouse together into a sea of cameras and questions, and Celeste realized she wasn't afraid anymore. "Mrs. Morgan," a reporter called. "How does it feel to know Cole is facing federal charges?" She stopped, turned to face the cameras. It feels like the beginning of accountability. But it's not enough. Cole is one man. The system that protected him for 12 years is still in place. We need to change that system. We need to change how complaints are investigated, how officers are held accountable, how victims are treated when they come forward. This can't just be about one bad cop. This has to be about building something better. Will you continue to advocate for police reform? As long as I have breath in my body and a voice to speak yes, because if we don't tell our stories, the world will rewrite them for us. And I'm not letting anyone rewrite what happened to my family. That night, Celeste's words were everywhere. Social media, news channels, op-eds. She'd become something she never intended to be, a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of resistance against injustice. But as she sat on Malik's bed that night, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, she knew she was still just a mother trying to protect her son. Everything else was just what happened when you refused to look away. The trial was scheduled for late January, giving both sides 3 months to prepare. 3 months that felt simultaneously endless and terrifyingly short. Celeste spent those months in a strange new rhythm of life that felt nothing like the one she'd known before. She went back to work at the hospital, but her shifts were different now. Patients recognized her from the news. Some offered quiet words of support. Others asked intrusive questions. One woman, elderly and white, told her she should have just cooperated with the officer. Celeste smiled politely and checked her blood pressure without responding because some battles weren't worth fighting. The media attention followed her everywhere. Grocery stores, Malik's school pickup line, the coffee shop where she used to go to escape. She learned to move through the world, wearing a mask of composure, saving her breakdowns for the shower, where Malik couldn't hear her cry. Darius threw himself into preparation with the single-minded focus that made him exceptional at his job. He worked with the federal prosecutors, helping them understand the nuances of Cole's pattern the way the system had enabled him. He coordinated with the other victims, making sure their testimonies were airtight. And late at night, when he thought Celeste was asleep, she'd hear him in the home office reviewing footage, taking notes, building the case that would finally hold Cole accountable. Malik saw a therapist twice a week. Dr. Patricia Lynn specialized in childhood trauma, and she worked with him through play therapy, letting him process what had happened through drawings and stories and the safe distance of metaphor. Some days he came out of her office chattering about the toys. Other days he was quiet, clinging to Celeste's hand, like he was 5 instead of 6. One afternoon in December, Dr. Lynn called Celeste into her office after a session. "I want to show you something Malik drew today," she said, pulling out a piece of paper. The drawing was crude in the way all children's art is crude, but the image was unmistakable. A woman lying on the ground, red crayon marking her face. A small figure in a car with tears streaming down. A large figure in blue standing over them, his hands raised. He titled it. Dr. Lynn said quietly, pointing to the shaky letters at the top. "The Night the Bad Man Hurt Mama." Celeste's vision blurred. Is this healthy? For him to keep revisiting it? Actually, yes. Drawing is how children process trauma. They need to externalize it to put it outside themselves where they can examine it safely. The concerning part isn't that he's drawing it. It's what he said when he finished. What did he say? He said, "I want other kids to see this so they know they're not alone if it happens to them too." Celeste pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the weight of her son's empathy, his instinct to help others even while he was still healing himself. "He's turning his pain into purpose," Dr. Lynn said, "just like his mother." The pretrial motions dragged on through December and into the new year. Cole's defense team, paid for by the police union, filed motion after motion trying to get evidence suppressed, trying to get the case moved to a different jurisdiction, trying anything to avoid the inevitable reckoning. Each motion was denied, but each one added days to the calendar, stretching out the wait. Christmas came and went, a muted affair where Malik opened presents with half his usual enthusiasm and asked if the trial meant the bad man would go to jail forever. Celeste and Darius exchanged a look over his head, both thinking the same thing. The federal charges carried up to 10 years per count, but they'd learned enough about the justice system to know that what should happen and what actually happens were often two different things. The judge will make sure he's punished, Celeste told Malik, which was true enough without being a promise she couldn't keep. New Year's Eve found them at home, just the three of them, watching the ball drop on television. As the countdown began, Malik turned to Celeste with the sudden seriousness that sometimes overtook him. "Mama, can I make a wish?" "Of course, baby. I wish that when the trial happens, you're brave. And I wish the judge sees that you were telling the truth. And I wish that next year we can just be normal again." The ball dropped. Fireworks exploded across the screen, and Celeste pulled her son close, kissing the top of his head, whispering a prayer to anyone who might be listening, that his wish would come true. The trial began on a Monday morning in late January, one of those winter days where the sky was the color of old steel and the cold bit through every layer of clothing. The federal courthouse was surrounded by barriers, and security protesters held back on both sides of the plaza. Signs reading, "Justice for Celeste," competed with signs reading, "Back the Blue," and "Not All Cops." Television trucks lined the street, satellite dishes pointed skyward, ready to broadcast every moment of what the media had dubbed the trial that could reshape police accountability. Celeste wore a navy blue dress that Margaret had helped her pick out, professional, but not severe. The kind of outfit that said, "Credible witness," without screaming victim. Darius wore his best suit, his Marshal's badge on his belt, a visual reminder that they weren't just some family the system could push around. They'd left Malik with Celeste's mother, who'd flown in from Atlanta. He'd clung to Celeste that morning, making her promise to come home, making her promise she was safe. She'd promised, hating that her 6-year-old had to worry about his mother's safety, hating that Cole had stolen his innocence in so many ways. Inside the courtroom, the gallery was packed. Celeste saw Marcus Webb and Keisha Johnson sitting together in the second row, a show of solidarity. Sarah Kemp was there with her recording equipment documenting everything. Officer Chen sat near the back, his presence a quiet act of courage that hadn't gone unnoticed by his former colleagues. And there at the defense table sat Garrett Cole. He'd lost weight during his time in custody, his face gaunt, his eyes hard. When he looked at Celeste, she saw no remorse, only barely contained fury. He blamed her for his downfall, she realized. In his mind, he'd done nothing wrong. She was the problem. She was the one who hadn't known her place. The judge entered and everyone rose. Judge Denise Washington commanded the room without effort, her presence filling the space with an authority that came from 30 years on the bench and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense from anyone. "Be seated," she said, her voice carrying. "We're here for the trial of United States versus Garrett Cole. Is the prosecution ready?" The lead prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chen, no relation to Officer David Chen, stood. He was in his 40s with silver at his temples and the bearing of someone who'd won more cases than he'd lost. "Ready, Your Honor." "Is the defense ready?" Cole's attorney, a man named Robert Harmon, who specialized in defending cops accused of brutality, rose. "Ready, Your Honor." "Then let's proceed with opening statements." Michael Chen approached the jury box, making eye contact with each of the 12 jurors who would decide Cole's fate. The jury was diverse by design, the defense having used most of their strikes trying to eliminate people of color, the prosecution fighting to keep them. The final composition was 7 women and 5 men, split evenly between black, white, and Latino jurors. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Chen began, his voice measured and clear. "This case is about a simple question. What happens when someone sworn to protect and serve instead chooses to hurt and oppress? What happens when a police officer uses his badge not as a symbol of justice, but as a weapon against the very people he's supposed to protect?" He walked them through it methodically. The traffic stop with no cause, the escalation without provocation, the violence captured on video, The racism spoken aloud and recorded for posterity. The pattern of behavior spanning a decade protected by a corrupt system. The defense will try to make you believe this was a misunderstanding, that Officer Cole was just doing his job, that Mrs. Morgan somehow brought this on herself. But the evidence will show you the truth. Officer Cole targeted Celeste Morgan because of the color of her skin. He assaulted her because he could. He traumatized her 6-year-old son because in his mind, people like them don't deserve respect. And he did it all believing he'd never face consequences because he never had before. Chen paused, letting the words settle. By the end of this trial, you'll see that this isn't just about one traffic stop on one night. It's about a pattern of abuse, a system of protection, and the courage of a mother who refused to let it continue. The United States asks you to hold Officer Cole accountable for his crimes. Thank you. Robert Harmon's opening was exactly what Celeste expected. He painted Cole as a dedicated officer making split-second decisions in dangerous situations. He suggested that Celeste had been uncooperative, that her memory was faulty, that the video didn't show the full context. He argued that the other complaints against Cole were just disgruntled individuals trying to get out of legitimate arrests. Officer Cole isn't perfect, Harmon admitted. But he's not a criminal. He's a man who spent 12 years protecting the people of Northridge, putting his life on the line every single day. And now his entire career is being judged by one incident, one moment taken out of context and amplified by media hysteria. We ask you to look past the emotion, past the headlines, and see the truth. Officer Cole did not commit a crime. He did his job, and that shouldn't be a federal offense. The first week of trial was all about establishing the pattern. The prosecution called victim after victim to the stand. Marcus Webb testified about his broken nose and ribs, his voice steady despite the trauma of reliving it. Keisha Johnson described Cole's sexual harassment fighting tears, as she explained why she'd been too afraid to testify the first time. Devin Price, now 19, and in college, talked about being 17 and watching Cole plant drugs in his car, knowing no one would believe him over a cop. The defense tried to poke holes in each story, suggested they were lying for attention or money. But the pattern was too consistent, too detailed, too damning. Then came Officer David Chen. He took the stand in his civilian clothes, his police career already over-terminated for disloyalty to the department. He testified about the culture of silence, the unspoken rule that you never reported another cop, the way complaints disappeared into Pierce's office and never emerged. I watched Officer Cole operate for 8 years, Chen said. I watched him profile black drivers. I watched him escalate situations that didn't need escalating. I watched him target people he thought couldn't fight back. And I stayed silent because I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of being ostracized, afraid of becoming a target myself. That fear kept me complicit in something I knew was wrong, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. Why did you finally come forward? Michael Chen asked. David Chen looked directly at Celeste. Because I read what Mrs. Morgan wrote, about her son asking why the bad man hurt his mama. And I have a daughter, and I realized that my silence was teaching her that it's okay to look away from injustice as long as it doesn't affect you personally. I didn't want that to be her lesson, so I stopped looking away. The courtroom was silent when he stepped down. Even Harmon didn't cross-examine him aggressively, perhaps recognizing that attacking a man who'd already sacrificed everything wouldn't play well with the jury. The second week focused on the night itself. Agent Vasquez testified about the investigation, the metadata on Chen's video proving it hadn't been altered, the maintenance logs showing the suspicious pattern of camera malfunctions. The supervisor from Child Protective Services admitted under cross-examination that the decision to remove Malik had been based solely on Cole's report, and that in hindsight the removal appeared to have been unwarranted. And then, it was Celeste's turn. She'd been preparing for this moment for months, working with the prosecutors, practicing her testimony, steeling herself for the defense's attack. But nothing could fully prepare her for walking to that witness stand, placing her hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth, and then sitting down and seeing Cole staring at her from 15 feet away. Michael Chen started gently walking her through the basics: her work as a nurse, her family, the night of the incident. She described it all clearly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Mrs. Morgan, when Officer Cole first approached your vehicle, did you cooperate with his requests?" "Yes. I provided my license and registration. I asked politely why I'd been stopped. I did everything my father taught me to do when dealing with police." "And what did your father teach you?" "To be respectful, to keep my hands visible, to not give them any reason to hurt me." Her voice caught. "He taught me those things because he'd been pulled over himself, because he knew that for people who look like us, a traffic stop can be dangerous." "Objection," Harmon said. "Relevance." "Goes to state of mind, Your Honor," Chen countered. "I'll allow it. Continue." Chen walked her through the escalation. The moment Cole demanded she get out. Her hesitation because Malik was sleeping. The violence that followed. "Mrs. Morgan, at any point did you resist Officer Cole?" "No, I was scared. I just wanted to go home with my son." "Did you say or do anything that could be construed as threatening?" "I asked questions. I wanted to know why I was being stopped, that's all." Then came the video. Chen played it for the jury again, and Celeste had to watch herself being slammed to the ground, had to hear Malik's screams, had to relive the worst night of her life in front of a room full of strangers. When it ended, Chen asked quietly, "Mrs. Morgan, what went through your mind when they took your son?" Celeste's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. "I thought I was never going to see him again. I thought they were going to take my baby, and I'd never be able to explain to him that I didn't abandon him, that I fought for him. I thought—" She took a shaking breath. "I thought about all the times I'd heard stories like this, and told myself it wouldn't happen to us because we were careful, because we followed the rules. And I realized that the rules don't matter when the people enforcing them see you as less than human." "Thank you, Mrs. Morgan. No further questions." The moment Harmon stood for cross-examination, Celeste felt her spine straighten. This was the attack she'd been expecting. The attempt to discredit her, to make her the villain, to justify what Cole had done. "Mrs. Morgan, you testified that you were tired that night after a 12-hour shift. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Exhausted even?" "Tired, but alert." "But you'd been on your feet all day dealing with emergencies under significant stress." "That's my job. I'm trained to function under stress." "Of course. But fatigue can affect judgment, can't it? Affect reaction time, emotional regulation." "I wasn't impaired, if that's what you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything, Mrs. Morgan. I'm simply asking if you were as sharp at midnight after a 12-hour shift as you would have been at 8 in the morning." "I was alert enough to know that being attacked and having my son taken was wrong." Harmon changed tactics. "You testified that you asked Officer Cole why you were being stopped. How many times did you ask?" "A few times. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. I don't know exactly. I was trying to understand what was happening." "Could it have been perceived as argumentative? As challenging his authority?" Celeste felt anger flash hot through her chest. "I was asking a question I had a right to ask. Since when is asking why considered challenging authority?" "Mrs. Morgan, I'm simply trying to understand Officer Cole's perspective." "His perspective?" Celeste leaned forward, her voice sharp. "His perspective was that I was guilty of driving while black. His perspective was that people like me don't deserve explanations. His perspective is on that video clear as day when he said, 'These people always think they're above the law.' I'd love to hear him explain what he meant by 'these people,' counselor." "Objection," Harmon said quickly. Non-responsive. Sustained. "Mrs. Morgan, please just answer the questions asked." But Celeste had made her point. She saw it in the jurors' faces. Harmon had tried to make her the aggressor, and instead she'd reminded everyone exactly what this was about. The cross-examination continued for another hour, Harmon probing for any weakness, any inconsistency. But Celeste had the advantage of truth. Her story didn't change because it had actually happened. Every detail was seared into her memory with perfect clarity. When she finally stepped down, she felt hollowed out, but also strangely lighter. She'd said her piece. The jury had heard her. Whatever happened next was out of her hands. The prosecution rested its case on a Wednesday afternoon. The defense began theirs on Thursday morning, and their strategy became immediately clear. They were going to argue that Cole's words on the video, while unfortunate, didn't prove racial motivation. They were going to claim that the force used was reasonable, given Celeste's uncooperative behavior. They were going to paint him as a scapegoat for a political movement that wanted to villainize all police. They called character witnesses. Fellow officers who testified that Cole was professional, dedicated, never racist in their presence. The defense called a use-of-force expert who claimed that Cole's actions, while aggressive, fell within the range of acceptable police tactics. But they didn't call Cole himself. Harmon knew better than to put his client on the stand where the prosecution could tear him apart. The closing arguments came on a Friday. Michael Chen stood before the jury and reminded them of everything they'd heard. The pattern, the video, the words that couldn't be explained away. "Officer Cole wants you to believe this was just him doing his job," Chen said. "But his job isn't to profile people based on their skin color. His job isn't to assault women in front of their children. His job isn't to target the vulnerable and abuse his power. That's not policing. That's tyranny with a badge. And the United States asks you to hold him accountable." Harmon's closing, argued for reasonable doubt, suggested that the prosecution had failed to prove racial motivation beyond all uncertainty, claimed that Cole was being judged more harshly because of the current political climate around policing. "Don't let emotion override evidence," Harmon pleaded. "Don't let media pressure influence your verdict. Look at the facts objectively and ask yourselves if the prosecution really proved their case." Judge Washington gave her instructions to the jury, explained the burden of proof, defined each charge, told them to consider each count separately, and then the jury was led away to deliberate. The waiting was agony. Celeste and Darius sat in the victim witness room, unable to leave, unable to do anything but wait. Hours crawled by. Marcus and Keisha joined them, all of them silent, lost in their own thoughts. It was dark outside when the message came. The jury had reached a verdict. They filed back into the courtroom. Celeste's heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The jury looked exhausted, some of them red-eyed. They'd been deliberating for 6 hours. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Washington asked. The foreman, a middle-aged black woman who'd been an accountant before jury duty, stood. "We have your honor. On the first count, deprivation of rights under color of law, how do you find?" "We find the defendant guilty." Celeste's breath left her in a rush. Beside her, Darius gripped her hand. "On the second count, excessive force, how do you find?" "We find the defendant guilty." "On the third count, violating Fourth Amendment protections, how do you find?" "We find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. People crying, people cheering, reporters rushing out to file their stories. Judge Washington banged her gavel, calling for order. Cole sat frozen at the defense table, his face drained of color. Harmon was already whispering to him, probably about appeals. Judge Washington addressed Cole directly. "Mr. Cole, you've been found guilty on all counts. Given the federal sentencing guidelines and the nature of these crimes, you're facing significant prison time. However, I'm going to allow both sides to present arguments at sentencing regarding the appropriate punishment. Sentencing is set for 3 weeks from today. Until then, you'll remain in federal custody. We're adjourned." Celeste turned to Darius and finally let herself break. She sobbed into his chest, not from sadness, but from relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. They'd done it. Against a system designed to protect its own, against the odds, against everything they'd won. Outside the courthouse in the cold January night, they faced the cameras one more time. "Mrs. Morgan, how do you feel about the verdict?" a reporter called. Celeste took a breath, gathering herself. "I feel like justice was served today. But I also know this is just one case, one officer. There are thousands of Garrett Coles out there protected by systems that value reputation over accountability. This verdict doesn't fix that, but maybe it's a start. Maybe it shows other victims that speaking up matters, that fighting back is possible, that you don't have to accept injustice just because it comes from someone with a badge." What do you hope happens at sentencing? I hope the judge sends a message that abusing power has consequences, that black lives matter as much as blue lives, that a badge doesn't put you above the law, it holds you to a higher standard. They went home to Malik, who'd waited up despite the late hour, sitting on the couch with Celeste's mother watching the news. When they walked in, he jumped up, running to them. "Did you win?" he asked breathlessly. "We won," Celeste confirmed, lifting him into her arms even though he was getting too big for it. "The jury said he was guilty. Does that mean he's going to jail?" "We'll find out in a few weeks." Malik nodded seriously, then hugged her tight. "I'm glad you were brave, Mama. I'm glad too, baby." The sentencing hearing 3 weeks later was shorter, more procedural. The prosecution argued for the maximum sentence, 30 years total. The defense argued for leniency, claiming Cole had already lost his career and his reputation. Judge Washington listened to both sides, then delivered her ruling. "Mr. Cole, your actions on the night in question and the pattern of behavior documented throughout this trial represent a fundamental betrayal of public trust. You took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you targeted, terrorized, and traumatized vulnerable members of your community. The jury found racial animus in your conduct, and I concur with that finding." She paused, her expression grave. "However, I'm also mindful of sentencing guidelines and the fact that you have no prior criminal record. While your conduct as a police officer was reprehensible, the law requires me to consider all factors." Celeste felt her stomach drop. She knew what was coming. "Therefore, on all counts, I'm sentencing you to 5 years supervised probation with the stipulation that you never work in law enforcement again in any capacity. You're stripped of your law enforcement credentials permanently. You'll complete 500 hours of community service working with organizations that address police brutality. And you're ordered to pay restitution to each of your victims." The courtroom exploded again, but this time with outrage. No prison time. 5 years probation. Celeste sat frozen, trying to process it. They'd won the verdict but lost the sentence. Cole would walk free. Darius's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "It's not over," he said quietly. "The civil suit, the federal investigation into the department, this is just one battle." But in that moment, it felt like losing. It felt like the system had found one more way to protect its own. That night, Sarah Kemp's news outlet ran a special feature. She'd interviewed Malik weeks ago with Celeste and Darius's permission, talking to him about that night. And she'd asked him to draw a picture of what he remembered. The drawing that aired on national television was the one from Dr. Lynn's office, the woman on the ground, the boy crying in the car, the man in blue standing over them. But Sarah had also asked Malik what he wanted people to know, and she played his answer in his small, serious 6-year-old voice. "I want people to know that my mama didn't do anything bad. The policeman was mean for no reason. And I want other kids who saw scary things to know they're not alone. And I want grown-ups to be nicer to each other so kids don't have to be scared." The segment ended with Sarah reading Malik's message directly to camera. From Malik Morgan, age 6, to everyone watching, don't be the next Garrett Cole. The video went viral within hours. Malik's drawing his words. His child's understanding of injustice resonated in ways that legal proceedings couldn't. People shared it with the caption, "Don't be the next Garrett Cole." It became a rallying cry, a reminder, a challenge to law enforcement everywhere. Celeste watched the segment with Malik curled against her side, and she realized something. They hadn't lost. The sentencing was disappointing, yes. Cole should have gone to prison. But that wasn't the only measure of justice. They'd exposed a corrupt system. They'd given voice to silent victims. They'd changed the national conversation about police accountability. And they'd shown Malik that speaking truth to power mattered even when the powerful tried to silence you. That was worth something. That was worth everything. "Mama," Malik said sleepily, "do you think people will listen?" Celeste kissed the top of his head, thinking about the thousands of messages, the protests, the policy changes already being discussed in cities across the country. "Some will," she said honestly. "Not everyone, but some. And sometimes that's enough to start changing the world." Spring came to Northridge with the kind of softness that felt almost apologetic, as if nature itself was trying to make amends for the harshness of winter. The dogwoods bloomed white and pink along the streets, and the air carried the scent of new grass and possibility. But for Celeste and Darius, the changing seasons only highlighted how much had changed in their lives and how much still needed to heal. The civil lawsuit against the Northridge Police Department moved forward through the courts with the grinding slowness of bureaucracy, but now it was backed by a federal conviction and national attention. The city's lawyers tried every delay tactic imaginable, but Judge Washington's ruling had created precedent that made their position nearly indefensible. By April, they were talking settlement again, but this time the numbers had changed. $3 million. Full admission of systemic failures. Mandatory reforms, including body camera policies that couldn't be circumvented, independent review boards for complaints, and annual training on implicit bias and de-escalation. Margaret Chen called them on a Tuesday afternoon with the news. "They're ready to settle. Everything we asked for. The money, the reforms, the admission. They want this to end." Celeste sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd sat that first night after being released, and felt the weight of the decision settling over her shoulders. $3 million would change their lives. Would secure Malik's future. Would let them breathe without the constant pressure of medical bills from therapy, legal fees, the cost of fighting. "What do you think we should do?" she asked Darius that night after Malik had gone to bed. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the glass of whiskey he'd poured but hadn't touched. "I think we take it. Not because we're selling out, but because we've fought as hard as we can fight. The criminal trial is over. Cole's been convicted even if the sentence was shit. The federal investigation into the department is ongoing. We've done what we set out to do." "Have we?" Celeste asked. "Cole's still free. The system still protects people like him." "Not as much as it used to. Every police department in the country is talking about the Morgan case now. Every training academy is using it as an example of what not to do. That phrase Malik said, 'Don't be the next Garrett Cole.' It's on posters in precincts. It's in policy memos. Baby, we didn't fix everything. But we moved the needle." She knew he was right. She also knew that accepting the settlement meant closing this chapter, and part of her wasn't ready to let go of the fight. The fight had given her purpose, had turned her pain into something meaningful. What would she be without it? "I want to use some of the money to start a foundation," she said, "for other victims. Legal funds therapy cost support networks, so the next person who goes through this doesn't have to do it alone." Darius smiled, reached across the table to take her hand. "That's perfect. That's exactly right." They accepted the settlement in May, signing papers in Margaret's office while news cameras waited outside. The announcement made national headlines again. Morgan family wins historic settlement in police brutality case. The story detailed not just the money, but the reforms, the precedent, the changes that would ripple out from this one case. But with the settlement came a new question, one they'd been avoiding but could no longer ignore. Could they stay in Northridge? Every street corner held memories of that night. Every patrol car that passed made Malik's shoulders tense. The house they'd loved had become a prison of trauma, and Malik's nightmares hadn't stopped despite months of therapy. "I want to move," Celeste admitted one evening as they sat on the back porch watching Malik play in the yard. He was building something elaborate with sticks and stones, lost in the world of childhood imagination. But every so often, he'd glance back at them, needing the reassurance that they were still there. "Where would we go?" Darius asked. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere Malik can just be a kid without reporters or people recognizing us. Somewhere we can breathe." They found the place in June, a small town in the mountains 3 hours from North Ridge but a world away in character. Ridgemont was the kind of place where people still waved to strangers. And the biggest news was usually about the high school football team. The house they fell in love with sat on 2 acres with a creek running through the back and enough space for Malik to explore without fear. "Can I bring my dinosaurs?" Malik asked when they told him about the move. "Every single one," Celeste promised. "And can I have a dog?" She and Darius exchanged a glance. They'd been talking about getting a dog for months, thinking the companionship might help with Malik's anxiety. "Yeah, buddy," Darius said. "We can get a dog." The move happened in August, right before the new school year started. They packed up their lives in North Ridge, leaving behind both the good memories and the bad. The night before the moving truck came, Celeste walked through the empty house one last time, her footsteps echoing in the hollow rooms. This was where she'd brought Malik home from the hospital, where he'd taken his first steps, where she'd kissed Darius on 1,000 ordinary mornings before heading to work, where her life had been normal and predictable and safe. But it was also where the fear lived, where every night she lay awake listening for sounds that might mean danger, where Malik checked the locks on the doors before bed because he was scared the bad man might come back. "Ready?" Darius asked from the doorway. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." Ridgemont welcomed them with the careful politeness of small-town people meeting outsiders. Some recognized their names from the news. Others didn't. The ones who did either offered quiet support or said nothing at all, respecting their obvious desire for privacy. Malik started second grade at Ridgemont Elementary, a brick building that looked like it had been there since the dawn of time. His teacher, Mrs. Anderson, was a grandmother who'd taught for 35 years and had the kind of calm authority that made children feel safe. She pulled Celeste aside after the first day. "I read about what happened to your family," she said quietly. "I want you to know that Malik will be safe here. If he needs space time, anything at all, you just let me know." "Thank you." Celeste managed fighting the tears that came too easily these days. "And Mrs. Morgan. What you did standing up like that. My grandson is 23 and black. You might have saved his life someday, so thank you." The dog came from the local animal shelter, a mutt with shepherd and retriever, and probably half a dozen other breeds mixed in. He was 2 years old with gentle brown eyes and a tail that never stopped wagging. Malik named him Justice, which made Celeste and Darius exchange a look that was half amusement, half heartbreak at their son's understanding of the world. "Why Justice?" Darius asked as Malik sat on the floor, the dog sprawled across his lap. "Because that's what we got," Malik said simply. "And because he protects me, like justice is supposed to protect people." That fall, Celeste went back to school. She'd been thinking about it for months about how her nursing skills had felt insufficient during the fight for accountability. She enrolled in a master's program in public health, focusing on health equity and the intersection of healthcare and the justice system. It felt right, like taking everything she'd learned and channeling it into something that could help others. Darius took a position with the U.S. Marshal Service that allowed him to work remotely most of the time, traveling only when necessary. He'd been offered promotions opportunities in Washington, D.C., but he'd turned them all down. His family needed him home, and he needed them. The Celeste Morgan Foundation officially launched in October, funded by a portion of the settlement and donations that poured in from across the country. Marcus Webb signed on as the director, having left his job at the hospital to dedicate himself full-time to helping other victims navigate the impossible maze of seeking accountability. Keisha Johnson joined as the legal coordinator, working with attorneys willing to take on police brutality cases. At the launch event, held in a community center in a part of the city that had seen more than its share of police violence, Celeste stood before a room full of people whose stories echoed her own and tried to find words adequate to the moment. "I didn't want to be here," she said honestly. "I didn't want to be the person who had to fight this fight. I wanted to be a nurse and a mother and live a quiet, normal life. But Garrett Cole took that choice away from me, and in doing so, he accidentally gave me a different purpose." She looked around the room at faces marked by trauma and resilience. "This foundation exists because I know what it's like to feel helpless. To feel like the system is rigged against you and there's nothing you can do. But I also know what it's like to fight back and win. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to matter. And I want that for everyone in this room. I want you to know you're not alone, that your story matters, that justice might be slow and imperfect, but it's possible." The applause was thunderous. But what stayed with her was the line of people afterward who hugged her, cried with her, thanked her for making them believe that speaking up was worth it. As the first year in Ridgemont turned into the second, Celeste watched Malik slowly transform. The nightmares became less frequent. He started making friends at school, kids who knew him as Malik the dinosaur expert, not Malik whose mom was on the news. He joined Little League and discovered he was good at baseball, his face lighting up with pure joy when he got his first hit. Dr. Lin, who they still saw via video sessions once a month, noticed the change too. "He's processing the trauma in a healthier way now," she told Celeste during a parent consultation. "He's learned that bad things can happen and you can survive them. That's a hard lesson, but it's also an important one. He's going to be okay." "How can you be sure?" Celeste asked. "Because he has parents who fought for him, who showed him that giving up isn't an option, who taught him that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right even when you're terrified. Those lessons will serve him his whole life." The second anniversary of that night on Route 47 came and went. Celeste and Darius didn't mark it with fanfare. They simply held each other a little tighter that night, grateful for what they'd survived and what they'd built from the wreckage. By the third year, life had found a new rhythm. Celeste finished her master's degree and took a position at the state health department working on initiatives to address racial disparities in healthcare. Darius was being courted for a position as head of training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, where he could shape how the next generation of federal agents approached their work. Malik was 9 now, long-legged and thoughtful with his mother's eyes and his father's quiet strength. He still remembered that night, probably always would, but it didn't define him anymore. He was just a kid who loved dinosaurs and baseball, and their dog Justice, who followed him everywhere like a shadow. One evening in early spring, as they sat around the dinner table, Malik asked a question that had clearly been building for a while. "Mama, do you ever forgive him, the bad policeman?" Celeste put down her fork, considering her answer carefully. "Forgiveness is complicated, baby. Some people think it means saying what happened was okay or forgetting about it. But I don't think that's what forgiveness is. Then what is it? I think it's deciding not to let what he did poison the rest of my life. Not to let his hatred turn me hateful. Not to let his cruelty make me cruel. Does that make sense?" Malik nodded slowly. "So you don't forget. You just don't let it make you bad." "Exactly. I think I can do that," he said seriously. "Because I don't want to be angry forever. That sounds tired." Out of the mouths of children, Celeste thought, came the kind of wisdom adults spent years trying to achieve. The impact of their case continued to ripple outward in ways both large and small. Police departments across the country had adopted policies requiring officers to pause 10 seconds before escalating a situation to ask themselves if their actions were based on actual threat assessment or unconscious bias. Training materials included case studies of the Morgan incident, analyzing what went wrong and how it could have been prevented. "Don't be the next Garrett Cole" had become more than a viral phrase. It was a cultural touchstone, a reminder that abuse of power had consequences, that victims could fight back, that justice was possible even when it seemed impossible. Sarah Kemp won a journalism award for her coverage of the case. She called Celeste when she heard her voice thick with emotion. "None of this happens without you. You know that, right? You could have taken the first settlement, stayed quiet, protected your privacy. But you didn't. You let me tell your story, and it changed everything." "We changed it together," Celeste said. "You gave us a platform when no one else would listen." Officer David Chen had found new purpose too. After being fired from Northridge PD, he'd struggled to find work, but eventually landed a position teaching ethics at a police academy in another state. He used his experience as a cautionary tale, teaching young recruits about the cost of silence and the courage required to stand up to corruption within the ranks. He called Celeste once, months after the trial, just to check in. "I think about you guys all the time," he said. "Wonder if I did enough, if coming forward made any real difference." "You saved us," Celeste told him honestly. "That video you provided changed everything. Without it, Cole might have walked free, and we'd have never gotten Malik back. You sacrificed your career to do what was right. That matters more than you know." As Malik approached his 10th birthday, Celeste realized how much had changed, not just in their family, but in the broader conversation about policing and accountability. The federal investigation into Northridge PD had resulted in a consent decree, with the Department of Justice overseeing reforms for the next 5 years. Sergeant Pierce had been fired and faced his own criminal charges for obstruction of justice. The entire Internal Affairs Division had been restructured. It wasn't perfect. There were still bad cops out there, still victims without recourse, still communities terrorized by the people meant to protect them. But the Morgan case had proven that change was possible, that fighting back wasn't futile, that one family's courage could shift the trajectory of something much larger than themselves. On Malik's 10th birthday, they threw a party in their backyard. Kids from school came running through the grass with Justice barking joyfully at their heels. There was cake and presents, and the kind of ordinary celebration that once upon a time Celeste had taken for granted. As she watched Malik blow out his candles, making a wish with his eyes squeezed shut, she felt Darius's arm slip around her waist. "What do you think he wished for?" he asked quietly. "Probably a new dinosaur toy," she said, smiling. "Or maybe for the Braves to win the World Series. Not world peace or justice for all. He's 10. He gets to just be 10. That was what they'd fought for, she realized. Not just justice in a courtroom, or reforms in a police department. They'd fought for Malik's right to be a child, to make wishes about toys and baseball, instead of wishing the nightmares would stop, to trust that the adults in his life would protect him rather than hurt him. Later that night, after the guests had gone, and Malik had crashed into bed exhausted and happy, Celeste and Darius sat on their back porch, watching fireflies dance in the darkness. The creek burbled in the background, and somewhere an owl hooted its lonely call. "Do you ever regret it?" Darius asked, "fighting instead of just taking the money and disappearing?" Celeste thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I regret that it was necessary. That we live in a world where standing up for yourself requires this much courage, this much sacrifice. But do I regret doing it? No. Never. Even though Cole only got probation, even though he's free right now, probably bitter and unchanged. Even then, because it's not just about him, it's about everyone watching. Every cop who thinks twice now before profiling someone. Every victim who believes speaking up might actually matter. Every kid like Malik, who grows up knowing that injustice doesn't have to be accepted just because it comes from authority." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We didn't fix the world, but we made it a little bit better. And sometimes that's enough." The following year, Celeste was invited to speak at a national conference on police reform. Standing before hundreds of law enforcement officials, policymakers, and activists, she told her story one more time. But she also told them Malik's story. About a 6-year-old boy who watched his mother be brutalized and asked the question that should haunt every officer who abuses their power. Why did the bad man hurt my mama? He couldn't understand why someone whose job was to help people would choose to hurt instead, she said. And you know what? Neither can I. After all this time, after all the testimony and evidence and explanations, I still can't comprehend what makes someone use power to harm rather than protect. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But I do know this. Change is possible. Not easy, not fast, not complete, but possible. It requires good cops to speak up against bad ones. It requires systems that prioritize accountability over reputation. It requires communities to demand better and leaders to deliver it. And most of all, it requires people like my family to be brave enough to stand up even when standing up feels impossible. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. But what moved her most were the officers who approached her afterward, showing her photos of notes posted in their patrol cars. Notes that read, "Pause 10 seconds. Ask yourself, am I doing this because of actual danger or because of bias?" Notes that read, "Don't be the next Garrett Cole." Notes that read, "Protect and serve means everyone." On the flight home, Celeste stared out the window at the clouds below and thought about legacy. Her nursing career had been about saving lives one patient at a time. But this work born from trauma and forged in fire had the potential to save lives she'd never meet in ways she'd never fully know. That night, tucking Malik into bed, she found him reading a book about civil rights leaders. He'd been on a history kick lately, fascinated by people who'd fought for justice. "Mama, do you think what you did was like what they did?" he asked, pointing to a picture of Rosa Parks. "Oh, baby, no. What I did was tiny compared to—" "But you didn't move when they wanted you to," Malik interrupted. "You stayed and fought even when it was scary. That's what she did too." Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. "I guess when you put it that way, maybe we're all just doing the same thing. Standing up, refusing to accept that things have to be the way they've always been, believing that we deserve better." "I want to be like that when I grow up," Malik said. "Someone who stands up." "You already are, sweetheart. You already are." Years would pass. Malik would grow into a teenager, then a young man. He'd tell his own story eventually, in his own words, at his own pace. He'd become an advocate in his own right, carrying forward the lessons learned from his parents' courage. The Celeste Morgan Foundation would help hundreds of families navigate the aftermath of police violence, providing resources and support that hadn't existed when Celeste needed them. Marcus Webb would be nominated for a humanitarian award. Keisha Johnson would go to law school and become the kind of attorney she'd needed when she was 23 and afraid. And in a small library in Ridgemont, in a quiet corner where people came to think and read and find peace, a display would eventually be erected. It contained Darius's old Marshal's badge retired after 30 years of service. Beside it, Celeste's nursing credentials and the award she'd received from the state health department for her work on health equity. And in the center, preserved in acrylic, Malik's childhood, drawing a woman on the ground, a boy in a car, and beneath it, in careful adult handwriting, his words, "Don't be the next Garrett Cole." Under the display, a simple plaque read, "Justice isn't grand. Sometimes it's just the act of not looking away." On a warm spring evening, 15 years after that night on Route 47, Celeste sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Malik was in college now, studying criminal justice, determined to change the system from within. Darius was inside making dinner, and Justice Older, now gray around the muzzle, but still loyal, dozed at her feet. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. She almost deleted it, but something made her open it. "Mrs. Morgan, you don't know me. But 5 years ago, I was pulled over by a cop who started to escalate for no reason. I remembered your story. I remembered what happened to you. And I stayed calm, recorded everything, and survived. I'm writing to say thank you. You saved my life by saving yours. You taught me that speaking up matters, that we don't have to accept injustice. I'm starting law school next fall because of you. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for not looking away." Celeste read the message 3 times, then showed it to Darius when he brought her a glass of wine. "Still think it was worth it?" he asked, echoing his question from all those years ago. She looked at the sunset, at the peaceful life they'd built from the ashes of trauma, at the ripples spreading outward from one family's refusal to stay silent. "Yeah," she said softly. "It was worth it. All of it." Because that was the truth that had sustained them through everything. Justice wasn't just about courtrooms and verdicts. It was about the stories we told and the courage we passed on. It was about refusing to let cruelty win, refusing to let fear silence us, refusing to accept that this was just the way things had to be. It was about a mother who loved her son enough to fight for his right to grow up in a better world. A father who used his power to expose corruption instead of looking away. A child who learned that kindness wasn't weakness, that speaking up mattered, that one person could make a difference. And it was about every person who heard their story and decided not to be the next Garrett Cole, who paused before escalating, who questioned their assumptions, who chose protection over violence, compassion over cruelty, justice over silence. That was the legacy. Not perfect, not complete, but real and rippling outward into a future they'd helped shape by refusing to accept the world as it was and daring to imagine it as it could be. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Celeste tilted her head back, watching them emerge one by one, each small light pushing back against the darkness. It was enough. It had to be enough. And somehow, miraculously, it was.